All right. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Path of Purpose. Today I'm here with Sondra. Sondra is a leadership and culture consultant. She's worked at companies such as EA and Bloomreach and has worked globally for these companies as well. So, Sondra, thank you for coming on Path of Purpose. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm sorry you're sick.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. All right, yeah. So my first question for you, Sondra, is just what has been your path to where you are? Have you gotten to where you are currently?
Yeah, so professionally, when I came out of college, I took one class while I was studying organizational communication. I took one class on, I can't remember what it was called, but I had to do like a presentation on adult learning and some imaginary, scenario that I cooked up. And so I talked to my professor about like, so what careers are like this? And he said, well, there's training departments inside companies. And this was 1990. It was a long time ago. So I tried to get a job as a trainer in a training department, which of course I'm a new grad, so that's not going to happen. So I ended up being an administrative assistant and just by luck of the gods got the best manager ever on the planet who, instead of firing me, because I was such a terrible administrative assistant, said, why did you take this job in the first place? And I said, well, because I think I wanted to be a trainer. And he said, I don't know why. He saw something in me and he said, okay, well, let's train you on how to do that and let's see how you do. You have to do both jobs at the same time. And that was my first experience of having somebody, for reasons that I didn't understand, kind of believe in me and take a chance
Hmm.
on me, which was a really refreshing experience. And that's going to come all full circle when I'm done with the path here. So I was there at that company for about 6 years. I learned how to do every kind of training program that there is, from career development to quality management to how to do sales to how to document your customer's voice, presentation skills. All I did was training for all different levels from maybe frontline supervisors down. And from there, both of my parents had been self-employed. So I thought that seems like a really cool lifestyle. We took great vacations. They were around. And so I said, I'm going to try that. And so I put my shingle out as a for rent trainer to these companies. There were all these, Decker Communications, Behavioral Technology, Blessing White, all these companies that would hire contract trainers. They'd pay
Hmm.
you some daily rate, which is a tiny percentage of what they were charging, but it enabled me to have a ton of freedom. I was single. I'm in my mid to late 20s and it was awesome. And what I didn't realize was that it gave me a great exposure to a whole ton of a different kinds of companies. So there was obviously a lot of software. This was, mid to late 90s. Um, and I got to travel around. I got to do the aerospace industry, healthcare, hospitality. Like I was all over the place. Tech, whatever tech was at that time. Um, and then I got married and this was now 2000, 2003-ish. And so the first dot com bubble happened. And they were my last contract. And the boss that I was working for said, well, do you want to come work for us full time? And I said, yeah, I think I probably should because I'm kind of 7 months pregnant. So I think I should have a job to land in that has benefits and all that stuff. So I ended up staying there for 12 years
Hmm.
and, had two kids, did the whole thing, got to again travel globally, got very deep into the whole video game industry, how that business works. Got to work inside game studios all around the world with their leadership team. So I was
Hmm.
growing my career slowly there so that by the end I was looking after global leadership and management development, partnering with leaders and managers, partnering with HR business partners to help them keep going with the work after I kind of left wherever, whatever studio I was in. And that's a big, huge company. Startups were kind of coming back onto the horizon. So I said, I want to try my hand at a startup. It's this huge company. I really liked working within the game studios. So I wanted to switch to startups. So I did three different startups. I entered the first two looking after global learning and development. They were both, rocket ship growth companies. So they needed help onboarding. They needed help putting management practices in place. Um, and the third one that I did, I actually said, I think I want to be head of people. That's going to allow me to have bigger impact, more influence about how things are done. I'm going to have more insight into strategic conversations and be able to guide and advise. Hey, if that's what you think you're going to do, here's what we need to do for the people on a more broad view than just learning and development. And that third one did not go so well in the end. There was just a lot of, it was the industry that we were in, and we were at the whim of Google and Amazon. If Google made a decision, if Amazon made a decision, it really affected our business model. And so, unfortunately, I had to lay myself off from there. At which point, by this time it's 2017. Kids are getting older, they're teenagers, having, more time, they have more freedom, they don't need quite as much attention. And I was taking a break because that was a pretty rough little stint of three startups, energy wise. And I kind
Hmm.
of sat back to think about what do I want to do, really. And I said, I think I want to go back to consulting. And
Hmm.
just by coincidence, an old acquaintance called me who had written two brilliant books in 2010, 2012, 2014, around that time frame. And they really spoke to the human experience of people at work. And I, at this point, really hadn't gotten my head around what is my own philosophy. Like, I kind of knew: be kind, be compassionate. But at the same time, I was still slave to meet the numbers and, sacrifice yourself in order to help your clients, your internal
Hmm.
clients, but still your clients, to meet their business goals. So I went to work with him for 6 years, and it was the most impactful work that I have ever done,
Hmm.
because it was just the right timing for me to take all of my experience, apply the knowledge, and then come out with, I mean, I call it wisdom. I don't mean that to sound stuck up and arrogant about it, but after being in the workforce for 20 plus years, you have a lot of data up here and a lot of experiences to reflect on. What did I do well? What did I do poorly? What could have I done? What could I have done better to be more effective? And so it was just kind of the convergence of lots of good experience, knowledge. And so it was some of the best work. We did some really great turnarounds. And also I got to, again, travel around the world, which was super, and see industries I'd never seen before or worked in. So, um, and that leads me to where I'm sitting here today. So, to come full circle, back to my number one boss back in 1990, um, that thing that he did, which was show faith, belief. I mean, he was on the eve literally of firing me, but he saw something else that was not conditioned on my performance in that other role,
Hmm.
and was willing to take a chance.
Hmm.
And so at the end of this 6 years in this other consulting firm, it was wonderful and beautiful, and it was brutal. It was so hard. We were flying around the country, go from Africa to Serbia to Turkey in the span of 5 weeks,
Hmm.
staying up all night, you know, dealing with clients in different time zones, um, tying together independent solutions into what we had to make look like a seamless, pre-thought out approach to our business. And it was just costing all of us inside the consulting firm a ton.
Hmm.
And so, unfortunately, we had to part ways. And it was a really tough experience that had me pick up the phone and call that boss from 1990, because it really shook me how much I personally gave up, compromised, and I did violate some personal principles in order to make that consulting firm successful. So I was kind of a disaster. Here I am, 55 years old. You think you have your shit together by the time you're 55 and you kind of know the way of the world. And I was just shocked. And so I picked up the phone and I called this guy who had been my very first boss when I was 21, 22 years old. because I knew that he would give me a soft place to land,
Mm,
you know, not just say suck it up and move on and find the next thing. Uh, and he really said, let's figure out what's going on and let's get you positioned to go and not have to be in that position ever again and to do work that's really going to be both financially and personally fulfilling. So that was a really long story. Sorry,
mm.
Jason, but
Wow.
that's what brought me here.
Wow. Um, that's an amazing story, and also how it comes full circle too.
Oh yeah, crazy.
What do you think he saw in you back then?
Um, I think I think he saw bravado that he could see through. So he's probably only 15 years older than me, So at that time he was still only something like 35, 37 years old or something like that, right? Which isn't war torn and all of that stuff. But I think he saw that I was able to express myself, that I was probably being underutilized in
Mm,
the role. And we did have team meetings and we were all invited, whether we were, conference room stalkers or administrative assistants. We were all invited. And I think I always had an opinion, and it wasn't useless. It was something that was thoughtful. I had studied psychology and organizational communication. So I was testing all the time. Like, is anything I learned actually true in the real world? You
yeah.
know? And he helped me write my thesis,
Mm,
for psychology. And so he had that interaction with me, so that I think he had that to be willing to take a risk. Yeah.
mm. So
I don't know. I'm going to
was
ask
him
him that.
was him helping you with the thesis? Was this after undergrad and after you had already been working there?
Yes. So I joined prior to getting my psychology degree. I was unfinished in school in my undergrad. And he agreed to let me work, while also going to finish that up, because I just had to take two more classes, one for each field of study. And so
Mm,
he agreed to let me do that. And he, by the way, was a clinical psychologist before
mm.
his role. I didn't know that when I joined, but yeah. So he helped me think
Oh.
it through, because I designed something just wholly too complex
Mhm.
for myself to do alone. So I needed help, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what did you end up doing your thesis on?
I did it on I can't even remember the title now because it was so long ago, but it was how humans behave in normal situations when they're presented with an unexpected human connection. So I
Mm,
would go into a movie theater well before the time started, but there were always a few people there, but it was mostly empty. And I would go sit down next to one of the people and see what they did. And I counted the behavior. When I was in line at the grocery store, I would turn around to the person behind me and strike up a conversation. I got
yeah.
into elevators that were more full, and I faced the back instead of getting in and turning around. And then I just
Wow.
observed behaviors. So with those three things that I thought were so fascinating, I then had to
Mm,
do all the statistical analysis and find all the correlations. And I was way over my head.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so fascinating. What about him do you think, like, when shit was hitting the fan, what do you think inspired you to go back and to speak with him?
Hmm. Um, so let's see. How do I say this concisely? Um, when I left my house of origin, which was a very comfortable house, we were very well cared for. We got to travel the world. We were upper middle class in a neighborhood that was a little bubble of, you know, properness in the state. And we got to go to great schools up until, wherever we chose to go for college. I have two older brothers, and I came along well after my two older brothers. And in my child's mind that doesn't know how to ascribe proper meaning to the things that your parents and your family do, in my child's mind, I came out of my house of origin believing that I should have low expectations or no expectations for myself. There's no expectation of greatness for me, and that love is conditional.
Mm,
It has to be earned. And you do that by working hard. And if you don't want to do the hard work, then forget it, because who needs people anyway? So I came out with this really, not uncommon, but also pretty messed up view of who I was, what my worth was. Um, and oddly enough, then I go for 20 years and I teach people how to overcome that, but I don't overcome it myself. And so I wake up at 55 and I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I don't know why I am so sad. I'm so disappointed. I had not zoomed out on that very personal part of the experience that I had in those 6 years with the consulting firm. And I had made no connecting of the dots. And so where I felt was, again, I felt like kind of this lost kid. And he was a person in my mind that stuck as he will be totally safe to go talk to and to go tell all the truth to. Because I'd walked through my career like most people do, right? And through life now with social media, everything's fine. We're all great. No worries. I can do it all. It energizes me to deal with change and problems. Yes. You walk through life like that. And I had pretty much fooled myself into that mindset as well, through all those years. Yeah. So I don't know. It was sort of this just magnetic thing. Like, a kid picks up their teddy bear because it's comforting. They don't know
Mm.
why. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Crazy.
What about it do you think at your that other consulting job led you to having that realization?
Well, I think personalities join together. People talk about it in mystical woo woo ways, but I think just very tactically and tangibly, no one can be successful alone, right? You need kind of all pieces of the puzzle in order to be successful. And I was the personality that would accommodate, compromise, die trying to make sure the client was happy.
Mhm.
And the other party um, was happy to let people do that.
Yeah.
And um, I don't think any of it was purposeful.
Mhm.
I think that we all get in habits of behaving. And as long as somebody is going to continue to be that other puzzle piece, then
Yeah.
we have no reason to look at ourselves and figure it out.
Mm.
And ask why, or, what could my contribution possibly be to this horrible situation? I'm doing all the work and da 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 da, and they're the ones who are, right? It's
Yeah.
very easy for all of us to do that. Um, and what ended up at the very end of the day was just very simply that uh, I was just on absolute empty, no fumes, nothing
Mm.
left. I could not do it anymore. And I wasn't sure if that business was going to survive. So I didn't
Mhm.
know that it would be a financially safe, right decision to make anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So walk me through this process now of, okay, you realize you're burnt out here and you're you ran out of fumes and you go reach out to this old mentor, and
Yeah.
from after that first conversation with him, how did that play out?
Um, the next 3 months were, now they're a blur. So this has all been in the last 7 months of my life. And they were, uh, I don't know how many people you can ugly cry in front of and just completely fall to pieces in front of in your life. I
Yeah.
didn't have very many of those. Um, and so I didn't realize the depth of kind of how screwed up I was and tied in knots and what I was going to have to go examine and figure out. So I tried for the first 3 months to kind of, oh yeah, I can unpack all this psychological crap and also try to build a business at the same time. Sure, I can. Absolute failure on, not absolute failure on the business side of it. I was going to go, hang out my own consulting shingle, or I was going to go look for another perfect internal position. And I realized that I just should not have done that at all. I should have like checked myself into somewhere where I could just unpack all this stuff. But life doesn't stop. Life
Yeah.
doesn't stop for you to do that work. You have to make the time, the space, and you have to prioritize yourself and resist it. So the first 3 months were really, really rocky. And he wasn't the only person that I reached out to. I also reached out to strangers, or, just people and that was the result of, sorry, that happened because I believed I had to network to start getting a consulting business
Mm.
underway. And so I reached out to some acquaintances kind of, and I found some groups of people that were really into and their vision is healing the world through connection, recognizing the loneliness that so many people on the planet feel and how they can help with that. So some of them
Mm.
work with through depression, some of them work with somatic therapy, some of them work with trucking companies and helping them learn better. I mean, there's just this huge variety of people. And there were just a few that I really kind of they resonated with, we clicked. And
Mm.
so I also reached out to them and they were so gracious in just letting me swim clunkily through that part of my life
Yeah.
um, with their help. And it kind of restored some of my faith in humanity, I think, also
Mm.
during that period. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Good questions.
What do you think was the role of having that sort of community to be able to have an outlet towards in um, the months after that and getting to where you are now?
I think a couple of things. I'm a Gen Xer. So like for so many of us, it's a very strong belief that we can do it ourselves. We don't need help. We don't need anybody. And we're pretty defiant about that and proud of that. And I think I had to really break that belief system in a lot of different ways. One, what's the business that I'm going to go do? I don't have all the answers. I have a set of answers that's fairly
Yeah.
legitimate after almost 30 years of working, but it's not tested. It's not, it's not beyond my own experience. It doesn't have any exposure. Um, and then I think the other thing was I met just the right people at just the right time to start cracking open that belief system and to allow myself to be seen in ways that I had never been willing to let people see before because I didn't trust. I didn't trust that I would be not dismissed. I wouldn't be made fun of. I wouldn't put my career or success at risk if I let somebody see who I actually am.
Mm.
Um, and so I think I learned that through those, and I got some just really good, timely, just by accident advice um, from people out there who are coaches themselves, helping people, who find them either solve their burnout problems or, unlock their limiting beliefs, and they have processes. And I was willing to engage in those processes um, and with those people
Mm.
to do the work. Yeah. And motivated, highly motivated to do so because I felt like crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. So I assume then from that you feel more fulfilled in what you're doing now.
Definitely. I knew even when I was kind of in those pits of yuck, um, I know that so many people at work, it hurts for them to care
Mm.
about the work they're doing on behalf of the companies or for the benefit of the companies. Like so many people feel compromised, they feel violated, they feel um, that all the hours and time that they're spending at work, they never get it back. It's a waste. They're walking around angry, frustrated, diminished. Um, they think they're getting cheated or betrayed in that relationship, like the companies are not living up to their side of the bargain. That has been my experience almost my entire career. Anything different is the absolute exception, and it's usually in bubbles within the company, pockets. It's one team with one manager that happens to have a different experience in their work life, or it's fleeting, right? It's for a very little bit of time. Or maybe they had it, but then the company made a decision that proved to them the company has no soul. The company doesn't care about people. You're just a number. You got laid off, right? And so in this market today, especially, there's a ton of that. Um, and I think everybody during COVID got this one little, it's almost like a slot machine or something, right? Like you want to believe companies are there to take care of you. And when so many companies did such a great job reacting and responding to COVID, meaning, yes, everybody go home. Here's all your equipment. Yes, we'll pay for your internet access. Do whatever you have to do. It got perceived as like a loving, caring thing. But then even before COVID was over, but certainly once COVID, not over, but once we started to think about return to office, um, people are just reminded like that was just coincidence. That was,
Mm.
why, and why couldn't they do that? Why couldn't they show that organization, that passion, that urgency, that caring? Why couldn't they show that the last 10 years I've been working here? So it became a really interesting scenario. Now I can't even remember what the question was that you asked me. Sorry.
Why do you think that is the case?
Which part?
The part about companies not caring about their people.
I think I think it's like it's become such a way of the world. And what I mean by that is I had really the privilege to meet this gentleman named Charles Vogel a couple of weeks ago who, um, consumerism, capitalism, even without those, um, people who have a vision for something, whether it's the business they're creating, the country they're trying to create, whatever it is, it always is going to run into this crash of, if I run this company, if I have a company and I set it up with the right vision, the right operations, the right processes, the right systems, it's easier for me to ask employees to be mature and be smart and show up and be grateful for the job, and therefore give us all your discretionary effort no matter what.
Mm.
And it's easier for leaders once things maybe go sideways or maybe they don't go sideways, certainly to say, well, the employees we hired just must not be the right ones. They just must not understand our smart strategy and they're just not performing well.
Yeah.
There's, we have just habitually, historically not made room for the fact that we all are human, that we all have biological, psychological, neurological reactions that drive us no matter what. And we all have belief systems that we're carrying around for
Mhm.
ourselves, individually from the leader on down, right?
Yeah.
So when we ask leaders to be authentic, to be vulnerable, um, what we're really trying to ask for is for them to step into the opportunity that they have right now. There's 8 billion people on the planet, 4 billion of them work. Leaders have an opportunity to impact 4 billion souls on this planet so that they go home from work feeling good about themselves, which then means they're nicer in their homes to their spouses, to their partners, to their children. They're better community members. They're better citizens. They're better voters. And I wish that leaders could stop for a second and get off the treadmill of MRR and ARR and quarterly results and analyst demands and investor demands and all of that and say, originally I became a leader because I wanted to have a positive impact on the world. It wasn't just so I could have a bigger house and a bigger car and,
Yeah.
all of that. Um, and I think there's a missed opportunity, and it's worse than a missed opportunity because um, so many people are just, I don't know, at worst miserable, depressed at work. At best, they're sort of just walking through those hours of their lives, and they're kind of little zombies for 8 to 10 hours, and then all of a sudden they turn on, right? And it's like, oh yeah, in my real life, I'm a mountain bike racer, I'm a botanist, I'm a, whatever these things are that we do that we're squeezing into
Mm,
the minority hours of our life.
mm,
So where I sit today is, um, I do not have the gigantic vision that Charles Vogel has. Charles Vogel has a humongous change the fabric of corporate operations on the planet. I do not have that. I have the how can I help an individual person times however many times, however many people I can get to. How can I help them think about their work life, their experiences in a way that allows them to be more positive and optimistic and beat back the loneliness, beat back the desperation, beat back the misery. There is a lot of self work for us to do, and it does take the desire on an individual basis to say, I'm willing to go into that fun house. When I was in high school, we had a carnival every year out on the blacktop. And I went into the fun house once, and it was the most terrible experience. I was like panicked, and I was a little whirling dervish in there running into the plexiglass, and I'd run into a mirror, and I was absolutely panicked that I can't get out of this place. You see yourself in all these different fat mirrors, skinny mirrors, tall mirrors, and everything. And um, it's hard to unpack, right? Life goes fast. We're busy. We've got family, kids, pets, bills, vacations, clean the house, do the dishes, all these things that pull at our energy and allow us to stay in kind of this false safety. So, um, anyway, my mission is any way that I can help a person who is ready to kind of pause and say, I want to change how I'm experiencing my life. That's
yeah.
my vision, to reduce loneliness, reduce diminishment, reduce marginalization. Um, I think that our kids need to learn how to do this. We need to be teaching kids how to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm. How
all
does
that.
somebody how how does somebody become aware of this and the importance of this?
Well, so, one of my titles in my career has been coach. And one of the core tenets of coaching is you can't coach into no request. So a lot of times as an employee in HR, you'll have a manager come to you and the manager will say, that Jason, I need you to fix him. Like, okay, Jason can't be fixed unless Jason knows, A, that he
Yeah.
needs to be fixed, and if Jason only wants to be fixed. Otherwise there's no point. Like, you can't fix him. Um, and so I think that, do you mean become aware of the problem? Is that what your question is? How to do it? Yeah. Um, I think everyone's aware of it to some degree, right? Like, there's some little voice inside of us that's telling us, even in those moments that are less obvious, I'm not happy about this. This doesn't feel right. This doesn't fit right. But we have become masters at rationalizing, right? Well, we have to go to work because we have to pay the mortgage, because we have to pay the bills, because we have kids we have to feed, because whatever, like there's survival needs of
Yeah.
having a job. And I think we all fall for someday maybe, you know? And I think we all also have an expectation when we join a company that a company is somehow going to live up to its side. And it's going to do all the things it promises us in the job description and the interview process. It's going to help us learn. It's going to help us develop. It's going to keep us safe and pay us and all of those things. Um, and sometimes it's obvious that you're in massive dissonance, right? You'll have physical health problems. You'll have stress. You'll have tough personal relationships. You know when you're in the struggle. And it's the thing of saying, I can do something about this rather than saying it's everybody else's fault. So once a person kind of is willing to make that small switch,
Yeah.
that's when somebody like me can come in and say, okay, I can help you. Because otherwise our brains are fabulous. They're fabulous, but they're there to protect us. Whether our belief about ourselves is right or wrong, whether our belief about the world is right or wrong, or serves us best or is most effective, our brain keeps us there, even when it's not the best thing for us, because that means safety from discomfort.
Yeah.
And our poor brain, our great brain, but our brain can't distinguish between an emotional threat and a physical threat, right? It treats them both exactly the same way. So um, I think there's just got to be that little light bulb that says there's something I can do. Um, I was thinking, just as early, it happens very early, right? I remember my kids were rushing out to school one day. They're little, right? They're in grade school, and they're because we're trying to do it in one trip, right? Everybody's got their arms full. And so because we're late because of, whatever reason, and the iPad falls out onto the driveway and it breaks. And somebody says the iPad broke, rather than I dropped the iPad, rather than I took too long getting up. I, didn't get my things ready last night, so that made me late, so that made me carry everything, and so I dropped the iPad. It didn't just magically break. And those little language things, they happen really early on, that we start ascribing responsibility or fault or blame outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I think those are kind of the cues, though, that people can be paying attention to say, I'm uncomfortable, I'm unhappy, I'm depressed, I'm angry all the time, I'm miserable all the time, and then have that little flicker of light that says, I seem to be the common denominator.
Yeah.
It can't be that every job and every company and every person is terrible when I'm the only common denominator in all of those situations. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. That the acknowledgement of the responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And the belief that you can do something about it, you
Yeah.
know? So
Mm.
it's complicated.
How would you what sort of conversation would you have with someone who's like battling a lot of uh, shame associated with trying to navigate this?
Oh, shame's a rough one to unpack, Jason. It's hard. Um, so without picking shame as a particular exact place of entry, um, the process that I have, and it varies. So I'll speak very generally about it. It varies because you don't know where a person is when they enter the process. And you might use different tools to try different things to kind of unlock different parts that need to be unlocked. But generally speaking, um, like I said, my childhood was fine. From the outside, a lot of people would say I was massively blessed and lucky to have the childhood that I have, and I should shut my mouth if there's anything I'm complaining about, right? But because children don't have the physiological capability inside their brain to understand the source of a feeling and the meaning of a feeling. They assign something to it immediately because we all want certainty. And so for me, my assignment of things that happened or didn't happen, or as I observed things that were happening for my brothers that weren't happening for me, I came out of that saying, I'm not worth investing in. There's no greatness expected of me, and love is conditional. And people might look at me and say, "You're crazy for thinking that after the childhood you had," but that's the truth. And
Mm.
obviously, there's people who have had way more traumatic childhood experiences than I have had. So the first thing, and this usually happens in layers also, by the way, right? Like you do the exercise once and you see some stuff, the stuff that you're willing to perhaps think about and face. So one of the exercises is very simply a look back, and a look back at things that you remember that are good or bad, and thinking about them, writing down, what is it about that thing that makes me remember it? Because they stick in your mind for a reason. It becomes like a marker in your brain. This is how I know that this is who I am in the world. This is how I know that this is how the world is. This is how I know what a mother should do, a father should do, a child should do, a husband should do, a wife should do. We have all these markers in our brain. And um, once we set that marker, everything else we observe, we manipulate to fit that marker. We rationalize to fit that marker. So we want to unpack that, because if I've come away with a belief that I'm not worth it, if I come away with a belief that the world is not safe, that every man is X, that every woman is this, whatever, and I have carried those beliefs forward in a way that has not helped me or has been detrimental to me, I got to unpack it and find the source. So it's that look backwards. We look at key events, high and low. We look at people who have been influential for better or for worse and why. We look at jobs that you had, places that you've been. We look at skills that you have learned, competencies, realizations that you've had. It's just a sort of an assorted list of questions, because we categorize things all differently in our brain. And so we kind of have to trick our brain to get to what are the nuggets that the brain is going to be willing to share with us at this moment.
Yeah.
So what are the conclusions I have come out from all of that past experience with? The next thing is to think about, people do a values sort, right? Where you look at achievement, advancement, wealth, economic security, fame, power, right? I call them guiding principles instead of values, because I think they shift as life stages shift, and as we're in different situations. I think they're probably set in terms of your top 10 most important, but I think they shift in order of priority. Um, what are they? Do you believe that achievement, advancement, and competition are the ways for you to live a life of confidence, power, synchronicity, calm, ease, less stress? Are those the way that you learned will get you to the best right life? And you learn that by observing people through your life, and you were taught certain ways, right? And do those actually feel right to you? Are those actually yours, or are they your parents, your teachers, your pastors, your coaches? Are those actually yours? So that's a big, long, potential exercise. Um, and I think, the way the world goes now, we all sort of want to have like the one thing. Well, what's the one thing? Well, there isn't one thing. You're a human, you're dynamic, you have fabric, you have years of experience. And so, for example, when I think about mine, if I think about the three things that I want to be the decision-making principles in my life, they are compassion, freedom, and peace. And each of those is underpinned by the remaining ones, right? So I can't be compassionate if I'm not intelligent. I can't be compassionate if I'm not tolerant for other people. I can't be compassionate if I don't have some degree of wisdom. I
Yeah.
can't be compassionate if I have no perspective. So all those things kind of fit together. When I think about freedom, freedom for me is not, oh, I can do whatever I want when I want. It's not that. It's that I feel able to use my free will. I am able to think how I want. I'm able to manage my life the way I want to manage it, so that, some people might say freedom and they would say, oh, you just want to take vacation whenever you want. No, I want to have the ability to shape my own destiny. So I also have to have then I have to have intelligence. I have to have some control. I have to have some stability. I have to have some order. And those words actually might seem opposite to freedom, right? But when in my language, that's what leads to those. So to really start to understand that tapestry and to know the sources of those things and to know, are they really yours? That's kind of step one. Um, and that you have to start building confidence in. I heard it described really well the other day, which was if you picture a jungle, like a really dense, Amazonian jungle where capybaras live. They're very small, and they have to walk so many times through the jungle to actually make a trail. And if they want to, for whatever reason, someday make a new trail, it's going to be really hard. And a lot of them would just say, I'll keep going the long way and I'll work hard some other day to make this new trail. And that's the same process. If we want to start making different choices in the smallest of moments, you have to be able to do that really intentionally. And
Mm,
that's uncomfortable. And that's what our brain fights against. That's why you
mm,
can't do it alone,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
Like
That's a good
that.
way
And
to
then
tie it
there's
back
other
too.
steps. Yeah. Then there's other steps after that, depending on where you're going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. What would you say has been the common thread that has tied your experiences together, your professional experiences?
Yeah. Um, coming from the generation that I come from, uh, safety and security are really important, right? Like you find the thing, you do the thing, you get rewarded for it over time and you stick with it. You don't complain and you just do the thing. Um, and if you feel a certain way about it, you don't really pay much attention to that because there's no use in doing that. And I think from the time I was probably a senior in high school was when I took my first psychology class. And I was so lit up by that. And I thought, there's something else here than just following the program, but I don't know what it is. And when I got to college, my dad had said, either you major in computer science or business, or I'm not paying for it. So I somehow made the case for organizational communication that it would like be a side door into business and at least I'd have something to do. And then I said, and I also want to keep studying psychology. And he said, well, you can do that on your own. I'm not going to pay for that. That's a bunch of, I can't remember his word now, but hipster shit, whatever. And I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway, because it's what, like, even organizational communication, it was hard for me to get B's. Like, it was hard. And psychology is like 4.0 easy, felt like the easiest
Yeah.
thing I could ever do because I was just so interested in it. Um, and so I think the common thread has been, if I think about what made me successful in it, it's this weird, almost oxymoronic thing about me, which is I felt so lonely and isolated that it became my mission to never let anyone around me at work, in my personal life, feel lonely or isolated or purposeless or powerless or whatever. And so that translated into every class that I ever taught. It translated into when I became a manager, how I interacted with the people who were my direct reports. Um, it became very just intuitively connected and like I was invested in them. Um, and I think I shared more than your average manager, but it was still never like the actual core.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't
The
the
core
seeds. It
of,
was that hard thing around the seeds inside the
yeah.
apple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I think that's the common thread has been about, you know, connecting with people. And that's what's enabled me to get jobs. It's what's enabled me to be successful in working with an executive team of a $4 billion company and get them to let down a little bit and be human with one another. Yeah.
Hmm. what's the best way to go about connecting with someone who you're meeting for the first time?
Um, it's different for all people. So professional, I'll say professionally, right? I think back on my experiences. Um, when I was very young, I had a class full of accountants and lawyers, and the CEO was also in that class, and I was teaching them personal development. And I was like 23, and it was the most ridiculous thing ever, really. And I felt ridiculous doing it,
Yeah.
and I even called my mentor the night before and I said, I can't do this. Are you kidding me? She says, yes, you can. You can do it. Trust the curriculum. Trust it. Trust it. And I'm not going to do it for you. You have to do it. I'm like, oh, all right. And the CEO came late to the class and he cracked a really bad joke. And you could hear that pause in the room where everybody was like, really bad joke, but he's the CEO, so we better laugh. And so somebody laughed, and then the rest of the people laughed, and it was really not a sincere laugh at all. And in that moment, I realized that people are just people. Here's the CEO coming in, and he's embarrassed about coming in late. And so he's cracking a joke to try to break the ice. And everybody is doing this embarrassed laugh at him. And I'm like, wow, that was really equalizing. And so, first of all, if I'm meeting somebody who is, more accomplished than me, older than me, positionally higher than me, whatever, I will always have some level of I'm intimidated. You're better than me. You're smarter. I'm a little bit scared. But then I remember that. And whatever they've accomplished has taken incredible discipline, resilience, whatever it is, but they're still just a person. So my first thing is switch to you're just a person. You're just a person who has an experience. Um, and then the second thing is ask questions that are about their human experience, whatever that is. If you happen to know their kid plays soccer, if even something as silly as the weather can actually get you into a deeper and more meaningful kind of conversation. But I think it is switching to kind of that curious mindset. Here's another human being. Here's another human being sitting across from you that has all the same crap that you have going on inside their head. Nobody is this, throne sitting Wizard of Oz person. So ask questions, share something about yourself, find some common ground, whatever it is. You're both a parent, you're both students, you're both from a certain place, you both, like wearing suit jackets with t-shirts underneath, whatever it is,
Yeah.
How do you like those headphones? What brand are they?
Yeah.
Anything that
Mm.
just connects kind of that person to person
Yeah. Mm.
connection. Yeah, that's what I've used.
Yeah. It it's powerful that you were able to realize that too in that moment of teaching that class and being able to look outside of yourself in that moment.
Yeah, well, so look, I had spent my whole life looking outside myself. I had spent my
Hmm.
whole life growing up as keeping calm, keeping peace in the household, making sure nobody was uncomfortable. So my whole life had been
Yeah.
about that and observing that. Yeah,
Mm. Mm.
yeah. Pluses and minuses to that.
What do you see as the biggest challenge for you currently?
I'm on the downhill side of my life. Like I can't say I've got my whole life ahead of me to do things, right? Um, and so that's a mindset that in a way it's limiting and in a way it's freeing because like if you
Mm.
don't do it now, you're never going to do it. And I'm definitely of that mindset. I know other people who are like, oh my God, I'm 55. I'm so tired. And I'm like, no, I still want to do all the things. I still want to get
Yeah.
out there. I still want to travel. I still want to meet people. I still want to push myself physically, all those things. Um, But the reality is that, look, time is limited. And as you get older, I think you just become more conscious of your mortality, for one thing. I think the other thing that like the very real challenge for me has been, I want to impact other human beings in a positive way. And I'm not sure of the best way to do it because it's still a market out there, right? It's still consumerism out there. And how do I find my way into that I don't feel slimy about myself, that I am actually connecting with people who want the help, need the help, will take the help, and all of that stuff. And yeah, I still have to make a living,
Yeah.
so I don't have a singular thing there for what is the challenge there. Um, but I think it's just the other day, even I was thinking like, wow, when you switch mindsets from, even if I was a consultant, but from working inside a company, taking direction, you're still taking direction, right? Even if you're the head of people, you're still taking direction of what the expectation is. To
Yeah.
working as a consultant in a firm, I was still taking direction. To now, oh, this is what entrepreneur means. Oh, that's something really different. And my mind hadn't made that switch yet. So I think it's a whole different way of being. Yeah,
Mhm.
very interesting time to be me.
Yeah. All
There's so
right.
many
Well, thank.
options. And I think for some
Yeah.
people, they love options. And for me, I struggle with options. Like
Mm.
I have a billion good ideas and 100 unwritten books on the floor, right? Like unfinished books. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
just kind of picking a path, committing to it enough in my head to move it forward and feeling
Hmm.
comfortable that like I don't have 80 more years to fix it if I screw it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if we're younger, though, who knows if we have 80?
Yeah, it's right. You're right. Yeah. But it's like I tell my kids now, they're 19 and almost 21, is you have to have the experiences. Don't try to never say no. If you say yes, go into it knowing what it is you want
Mm.
so that you uh, don't get sucked into a machine, so that you don't find yourself giving yourself over to something else. Like be intentional and be conscious of what you're
Yeah.
doing, why you're doing it, so that you can make that choice, because you can never go back and take the path you didn't take. It's not there
Mm.
anymore. The same exact
Yeah.
path is not there. You're a different person. That's a different scenario. Um, and that you have so much ability, power, control to decide who you want to be, how you want to be, and what you want your life to be like. But the world makes it really hard to hang on to that.
Mhm.
And you have to be really committed to saying, this is how I want it to be, and comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes me think of another question, which is how do you handle when something happens isn't in your vision of how things are meant to play out or how you want things to play out? How do you
Yeah.
deal with that?
Yeah. That's hard. Um, so I think there's a couple of things. Number one, you can subscribe to, things happen for a reason. And if you subscribe to that, that means you're always looking for, it doesn't mean you're confabulating or you're making stuff up or you're, deluding yourself, but you say, okay, this has happened. So what do I learn from it?
Yeah.
And if you believe in the greater power did it to you for a reason and gives you nothing more than you can handle, fine. That's part of your belief system. That's fine. But the thing that you don't want to do is to get stuck in a victim mentality and say, oh, this always happens to me. Oh, I'm never going to get better. Oh, it's everybody else's fault. At some point, you have to say, where's my bootstraps? I'm going to reach down, I'm going to pull them up, and I'm going to make the best I can out of this sucky situation, because
Mm.
life will throw you so many sucky situations. And it's your whole attitude about what those sucky situations are that you have no control over. Zero control. You have an image of what is it like What's it supposed to be like when I get married? And then you have what actually happens. What is it supposed to be like when I have a baby? And then it actually happens. And then you have just the crap that life throws at you, the illnesses, the accidents, all those things. And so the stronger you can be about learning how to accept and learn,
Mm.
the better off you're going to be in the big things and the small things that happen to you. And knowing that you have to go through a process every time those things happen. Like the more you just ignore it, the worse it's just going to come out later and bite you in the ass in either physical illness, or you're going to keep digging yourself a deeper hole that you don't like to be in, which is a pretty weird and broad statement, but hopefully everybody knows what I mean by
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and answering all my questions. It was
You have
a
great
pleasure
questions.
to
I'm
have you
happy
on.
to do it. Thanks.
Cool.
Me too.